My name is Tabatha Holley. I am from Dawson, Georgia. My mom was born and raised in Parrott, Georgia, which is on the outskirts of Terrell County. Very rural place. My mother picked peanuts and cotton, and along with her, I want to say 8 siblings. My father was also born and raised in Parrott, Georgia. Really impoverished community at that time, and still remains so. Really a community really haunted by racial trauma. My parents watched so many things growing up, including things like the nigger push in the 60s and 70s. My father talks about coming back home from the north and seeing a black man being drugged from his car. Police car, and being drugged down the street. My mother often talks about the nigger push. Yeah, really community really haunted by this racial trauma and past, and really trying to heal from it. I came back so that we can heal from it and come back as a community, make a comeback. So I knew that I wanted to go to Spelman at a very young age. I probably knew I wanted to go to Spelman when I was about 15 or 16. I knew that money would be a big barrier to me going because my parents are poor people who live off of disability and Social Security, and not many people who leave this area are really able to go to elite institutions like Spelman. So I knew that if I wanted to go to Spelman, I would have to work really hard to make that a possibility. I'm grateful because I had community members that were encouraging of me and believed in my ability to succeed. Originally, I wanted to go to Spelman so I could pursue a degree in political science so that I could be a lawyer and come back and do some work for the community in that way. But then I got to Spelman and ran into Beverly Sheftal and Mbahati Kumba, both women's studies scholars, and then there's an incredible women's studies department at Spelman as well. And so my first year, I was reading in this class called African Diaspora and the World, and I was reading about movement experiences and black people, and I was reading these things through the lens of black women. So I was exposed to the work of Alice Walker and Beverly Sheftal and Mbahati Kumba, Toni Cade Bambara. I was being exposed to these radical ideas about womanhood, particularly black womanhood, and sometimes these women were from the South. I felt a deep calling to pursue women's studies because I am a black woman, a black queer woman, and I felt that while I had some background in movement spaces, that they were many times black male dominated, and so in response to that, I did pursue the comparative women's studies major. Deep into me being at Spelman, I ran into Reverend Lisa Diane Rhodes, the chaplain of the seminary, the lead chaplain, and grew up always feeling this longing to God and God's people, but never thought that I would be able to pursue pastoral ministry because in our tradition, a lot of times in the South, black women are told that they are not called to preach. And so my sophomore year, I ran into Reverend Lisa Diane Rhodes and became a part of the Wisdom Center. Wisdom Center is Women in Spiritual Discernment of Ministry. And there I was able to get some church ministry kind of under my belt in a context that was mainly led and orchestrated by black women. Beautiful experience, changed my life, allowed me to preach in the way that fit me, that was authentic to me. Was able to find my voice through the Wisdom Center, through so many black women mentors, and through so many experiences of leading worship and all of these things in this really bold and empowering way. Neglected that to go into a more academic track of doing research. Thought I wanted to go and get my PhD right after undergrad so that I could get my PhD by the time I was 30. And those plans were not God's plans. So I quickly reoriented myself in the middle of my senior year to prepare to go to seminary and pursue this calling that God had on my life. I began a Master's of Divinity program at Union Theological Seminary in the city of New York. Ultimately, I realized that a lot of the trauma that I had been facing had been religious trauma. A lot of the things that I had been through through the church and through people's conversations about God, and then realizing also that theologically there was something that was missing in our conversation in the South amongst black people. And one thing that was missing in our conversations about God was race and oppression. And where was God while we are here suffering? We're here worshiping God, we're here praying to God, but what does God think about our lives and our day-to-day realities? Is this God caring about us? Does God want us to pursue and fight for justice? Are we being told this in a church context? And if so, in what ways? In what type of language are we being told that God wants to empower us to fight for our liberation? And these are the questions that ultimately led me to seminary. It has not been an easy process since then. In December of last year, I came home for Christmas from the city, and my dad said, I'm going to give you my CDC. And so here's your CDC, and you can do with it what God tells you to do with it. And I said, whatever, I'm going back to seminary to pursue ministry. My second semester happened. This was post-Trump. When all these conversations were happening, we had Flint happening, water crisis happening, we have all these conversations about the environment, we have Standing Rock. In March, it hit home for me, and I got a call that my mother was sick. And that shifted me very quickly, because in November we had just gotten done having conversations with white people about the fact that white people need to go home and have conversations at Thanksgiving dinner. And so that left the question for me, well, what am I supposed to do? And so when March happened, my family crisis, it called me back to my own reality, my own situation. And it dawned on me that it wasn't just my mother dying of cancer, but it was my next door neighbors. And it was some of my teachers, and it was some of my friends, and it was some of my friends' mothers. And we were all kind of battling this same type of sickness and illness, and in addition to diabetes, in addition to hypertension, and all these other things. I needed to return home to not only address my own personal family crisis, but also a communal crisis. So I got a community organizing internship in April. I got a community organizing internship from Union, and I was given the option to work for Southern Zone New Ground. I took that opportunity. SONG is a queer liberation organization that works across the South to bring matters of injustice to awareness, to the forefront of people's imaginations, particularly queer people in the South. So I was able to take a lot of the resources and tools of base building that SONG has and bring them to a rural Southwest Georgia context. And so I've been in the process of building up a board so that we can reimagine what we want James L. Barnes CDC to do. James L. Barnes Community Development Corporation is the organization that my dad began in the early 2000s. It began in that white building over there. And we started off by just having neighborhood children come by, and we would feed them, and we would play together, and we would do our homework together. It was beautiful to watch this collaboration of people, of community members just caring about their community. And so throughout the years, the organization got grant funding to do work with youth that were involved in the criminal justice system, and the organization was really invested in building houses for low-income people who had never been able to buy a house or build the credit to be able to buy a house, and they were able to build 2 or 3 houses out of that project. Eventually the resources, the federal resources and other resources kind of just ran out, and the capacity to keep this organization going kind of dwindled. So here I am again, asking many of these same questions. Summer, what I had the opportunity to do was just work with children. The children decided that they wanted to protest so that they could have a swimming pool in the community, because it didn't make any sense for Reverend Holley to have to keep driving them 30-40 minutes on a 15-passenger van to get to a swimming pool. there was no question that the swimming pool was what the community wanted, because we had been asking for it before. About 10 years ago, may have been 8 or 9 years ago, there was a 9-year-old that found a pond in the back of his house, and him and his siblings found the pond, and they decided to go and swim in this pond. And the pond had a sinkhole in it, and this 9-year-old drowned. And the community members, my dad, Mr. Lucius Holloway, the NAACP chapter essentially, and some other folks just kind of came together and decided, well, this is the opportune time to try to bring a swimming pool to Terrell County or to Dawson. Because first of all, children shouldn't feel like the pond in the back of their house, that they don't know who it belongs to, but it's just something that they found, they don't have anything else to do. That should not be the only option that children had to be able to swim. And furthermore, granted there was a sinkhole, if a child is in a situation where there is a pond near their house or what have you, that they can't get themselves out of a situation where they can be able to swim themselves to safety. So this group of community members organized and went before county commissioners board, went before the city council board, had a whole list of strategies and ideas to be able to bring this swimming pool, had envisioned how they were going to bring it, and all of these things. They were presenting these things, trying to propose that the community apply for a community block grant to maybe get some funding. There was some conversations about SPLOST money being used to bring a swimming pool so that the city and the county would be able to afford to bring this form of recreation to the county. And those efforts failed. The parents went before the city council and the county commissioners and asked for it and pleaded their cause and begged for their cause, and it just came to no avail. And so there was a point where that movement, or that move to get this swimming pool, just kind of fell away. I felt that given we were in a context in which children were going to the swimming pool, where children were being frustrated because they had to drive 30-40 minutes away, and children were also being forced to have conversations about freedom and equality through reading and learning, I felt like this would be an opportunity time to allow the children to be able to voice what their concerns were. I got a curriculum from a freedom school based out of Brooklyn, and I was able to bring those books home and read to the children. One book that stood out to the children was The Youngest Marcher, because this was a story of a 9-year-old girl out of Birmingham, Audrey Faye Hendricks, who was the youngest child to be arrested in a children's march for protesting, because she wanted to be able to go to the ice cream shop and eat ice cream like the white children. She wanted to be able to go into the clothing store and try on a hat or try on a dress. She wanted to be able to have basic human rights. And so she told her parents, I want to march, I want to protest for my rights. And the children said, we should protest to get a swimming pool. And those were the first one-on-ones that I had this summer with the children. So the children who live in Porter's Alley on the Pool Road projects, and it's another group of projects that's down the street from Rains Baptist Church. Those are the children that my dad picks up to take swimming and to read. Children in those particular areas have a hard time getting to recreation that's located kind of how do I say it, on the other side of town. So there's this huge gigantic highway right here that kind of separates these children from any type of recreation, and so there is a playground in this backyard that's run down. The children are not supposed to come play in, but that's the only place they have to come play in, especially younger children. These were the children that were commissioned to go and collect petitions in their projects and go door to door to door and say, hey, we want a swimming pool. We need you to sign this petition because we're going to take it to the county commissioners meeting tomorrow and present it to our elected officials. And so they went from door to door and they collected those. They collected about 80 signatures collectively as a group. And they passed out flyers to tell people what we were doing, to tell people to come out with your swim gear and prepare to protest, and to tell the powers that be that this is something that our community wants and deserves, and it's summertime, and this is just what we want. We showed up at 8 o'clock that morning, and we held signs, cardboard boxes, signs. We got a lot of cardboard from members of the community. We cut that cardboard up, and the children actually helped us cut that cardboard up, and they actually wrote a lot of those, their own signs, and put their names on the back of those signs, and they brought those signs on that morning, and they held those signs while the commissioners were inside meeting. And when it was time for us to go inside and make our demands known, we went inside. We did not plan on all children coming inside, but that ended up being the case. Children ended up coming, all the children, about 15 to 20 children came inside saying, hey, we want a swimming pool and we need community support if we're going to get this. The aftermath of that was very interesting. We went before the board, and I made a presentation, and I said, when you're done with the meeting, when you've made your decision, come outside and talk to the children. Come and shake their hands and see how they're doing. 2 out of the 5 came out to speak to the children, came out to shake their hands. The other 3, including the chairman, decided to go out the back door. And we waited at his truck for him for a little bit. We took a picture outside by his truck. We waited for him, and we waited for him, and we waited for him. And actually, one of our children wrote a personal letter and delivered it to his door the night before the meeting. And so I think that the aftermath of this conversation, of this meeting, was we got to see and witness where the heart of the community lies. And so I think going forward, now we know who our allies are and who our opponents are, and maybe who we can win over and who we can't win over. And as well, we're going to have to rethink about this process, because I think beforehand there were certain people that we thought we could trust, and now we're able to see that they can't even come outside and shake hands with children. And so I don't know what that means for us going forward, but we're having those conversations, and hopefully we're able to broaden this conversation within the CDC to not just talk about recreation in terms of a swimming pool, but also this community center. And so not only this community center, but we got elders in the community that can't get their roads paved. And then not only that, but we have, like I said, we have water. We might even have a water crisis. We have a crisis. We don't know what type of water we're drinking, what kind of air we're breathing. We have a chicken plant, and we have a golden peanut plant, and we have runoff. And, you know, we have all these different questions that need to be answered in so many ways. But I think that the swimming pool issue kind of brought attention to how real these processes are. And how civic government is supposed to work, but we have to allow the people to be able to come out and see for themselves how the people that they're electing are treating them and their children and their elders. Over the next couple of months, the CDC plans on engaging the community and figuring out what it is, what strategic things does the community want for itself, and what does it plan on doing about it. How can we help the community champion for its own causes? Before we get a building, before we build a garden, before we build any more houses, we need to get an understanding that the community has to have a lot of control over this situation. Like, the community has to be the deciding factor in whatever we do going forward. And so we have to figure out, are we going to write covenants with the community, to whereas if something happens to the building, that the community is responsible for that. We have to be able to do that. So with the board itself, which is comprised of school teachers, elders who live in this very community, other folks that live in Dawson and Terrell County, who have children that go to that are part of the local school system. My goal right now is to get these particular individuals trained so that we begin to imagine ourselves as the community organizers that we are and we've always been. Over the next month, we plan on doing trainings once a month and meeting once a month, making board decisions. And then in October, we're actually going to be doing a town hall for the community, and particularly people who live here, people who have graduated from the high school and are coming back and want to know what is the state of the community, to hear from the people who never left, just to figure out where we are. We're in a listening process. We want to listen to what the community wants. What do the children want? What do the elders want? What do the queer people want? What is it that we want? That's where we are. It's figuring out what the community wants, what the community needs, and how can we help the community get what it needs. How can we build the community's capacity to fight for its own best interest. There's a lot of healing that has to happen, a lot of healing from racial trauma, a lot of admitting that what we're coming out of and what we're facing is a lot of racial trauma, and white supremacy, and homophobia, and sexism, and we have to acknowledge where we are, but we have to move the community to do the same thing. And so how we best do that is what we're investing our energies in over the next year in Dawson, Georgia.